What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video we're going to be breaking down all of the main card fights from UFC 274. We've got 5 really interesting matchups to take a deep dive into in this breakdown video, and each of these matchups is very interesting from a betting point of view. So I'm hoping that you can use the information in this video to make better betting decisions and maybe even earn some extra cash. And if you like the breakdown videos for the fights that I'm going to be covering here, don't forget that on my website you can find breakdown videos for all the other fights on this card, all of the prelim matchups. Head on over to MMABettingTips.com, you'll find a link to that in the description below, where you can find breakdown videos like the ones I do now on YouTube for every single fight on every single UFC card. On there you'll also find a VIP chat room where you can communicate with me on a daily basis, ask me any questions you've got about upcoming fights or betting strategies. And you'll also find a wide range of bets on my website, all kinds of things, over-unders, prop bets, straight money line bets, pretty much all of them are profitable. So head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com, check it out, link in the description below. But it is very important to gamble responsibly, do your own research, obviously consider the information that I'm sharing with you in this video, but do your own research, make your own decisions, and remember to gamble responsibly. Having said that, I have been doing this for a long time. I do earn a living from betting on MMA, and I have put a lot of work into researching these fights. So all the information I'm going to be sharing with you in this video comes from a lot of experience, a lot of research, and hopefully you'll find it very valuable. Hopefully you'll find this a valuable source of information. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get into the breakdowns. And the first fight that I want to cover in this video is an extremely interesting matchup between Donald Cerrone and Joe Lauzon. I absolutely love this fight because what we usually see from the UFC is as fighters get older, they reach the tail end of their career, they start to decline. The UFC looks to build the next generation of talent off guys like Donald Cerrone and Joe Lauzon, right? They match up guys like Cerrone and Lauzon with these young, hungry bulls, and we know how the story usually ends. The young, hungry bull usually goes in there, smokes the old veteran, and we end up in a situation where the veteran's legacy gets tarnished, and they end their careers in the UFC under pretty tragic circumstances. We're kind of seeing the UFC throw Nate Diaz to the wolves at the moment, recently matching him up against Leon Edwards, which was obviously a fight that was very tough for him. And now, thinking of matching Nate Diaz up with one of the scariest guys in the UFC, Khamzat Chimaev. So I hate matchmaking like that. I love the whole Veterans League thing, that's been thrown around as an idea. And fights like this between Cerrone and Lauzon, where you've got two veterans going up against one another. It's a fair fight. It's an interesting fight between two legends of the sport, two fan favourites, and I'm all about it. It's no fun researching fights when you've got an old veteran against a young, hungry bull, because 9 times out of 10 things ain't gonna end well for the guy that we all love, right? The veteran. Whereas here, it's a level playing field. Both these guys are in the tail end of their careers. They're both very old. They're both on a steep decline. They're both getting worse from fight to fight because Father Time's undefeated, and that's the way it goes for older athletes. But it's a level playing field. Both guys are in the same boat, which makes this a super interesting matchup to break down. So what we'll do is start off by taking a look at the odds on this one. And we can see that Donald Cerrone is the favourite at average odds of about 1.57, which is going to be minus 175 for an implied probability of 64%. If we take a look at the odds on Lauzon, he's around an average of 2.50, which is going to be plus 150 for an implied probability of 40%. Now, the odds on Cerrone yesterday were a lot better than they are today. So if we look at the odds movement chart, we can see that Cerrone's odds have... Actually, the odds movement chart's not showing it for some strange reason, but basically yesterday the average odds available on Cerrone was like 1.61, 1.62, which is minus 164. The odds have declined a little bit. I did recommend in my community a bet on Cerrone yesterday, and we do tend to move odds from time to time, not on every fight that I recommend betting, but we often do have an influence on the odds, so I don't know if that's got anything to do with it. But the odds on Cerrone are declining. And I can see why, because this is a pretty good stylistic matchup for Cerrone for all the reasons that I will share with you now. So if we look at the tail of the tape, Cerrone's 39 years old, 6'1", with a 73-inch reach. Joe Lauzon, 37 years old, 5'10", with a 71-inch reach. So both guys roughly about the same age, roughly about the same size. But of course we know Cerrone is long, lean and tall and does fight very long. So Cerrone will have a bit of a size and reach advantage over Lauzon. And Cerrone is the type of fighter that knows how to use it. He knows how to use his length and he does fight long. But obviously age is a big X factor to consider in this matchup because they're both at the tail end of their careers. 39 years old for Cerrone, 37 years old for Lauzon. They both also have a lot of miles on the clock to go with it. You look at Cerrone, you know, he's had over 50 pro fights. And you look at Lauzon, he's had close to 50 pro fights. So a huge amount of miles on the clock, tons of injuries, tons of knockout losses. They've taken tons of damage. And all that's going to be taking its toll, you know, on guys like this that have been in so many wars. Guys like Cerrone and Lauzon, because of the amount of miles they've got on the clock, because of their ages, they're going to be on a very steep decline. We've obviously seen that from both guys over the last few years where, you know, every time we see Lauzon and Cerrone, you can see that they're just not as capable of performing near the level that they were before. They're not as athletic, they're not as sharp, they're not as powerful, they're not as fast. But of course this fight is in the lightweight division where, you know, the lightweight division, one of the lighter weight classes, it is a division that is very much based on speed and reflexes and athleticism, which are some of the first things to go as you get older. But that's why I really like the matchmaking in this fight, because it's kind of a level playing field, right? Both these guys are on a steep decline. They're both in their late 30s. They've both got a lot of miles on the clock. And because of that, we can kind of research both guys, evaluate where they're at this stage in their career, and treat them kind of equally. You know, let's face it, the better days are behind them for both these guys. Now, another X factor to consider in this matchup is obviously that the fight is taking place at lightweight, which has been a very difficult weight class for Cerrone to make, particularly over the last few years. And on top of that, it doesn't get any easier to make weight as you get older. You know, at 6'1", Cerrone is a very big lightweight, and he always looks like death at the weigh-ins. I wouldn't expect this weekend to look any different. I'd expect Cerrone to look like a skeleton weighing in. But he always makes weight. He always kills himself to make weight. But safe to say, Cerrone at lightweight, you know, is not the healthiest version of himself. He has to dehydrate himself and deplete his body a lot to make that 156-pound, you know, lightweight limit. And so it's probably going to be a little bit more chinny at lightweight, a little slower as well, and just not as athletic, not as powerful. Another X factor to consider in this matchup is that both guys are coming into this fight after a decent sized layoff. So, you know, we know that two guys in their late 30s in the lightweight division are going to be declining a lot from fight to fight. So, when we're researching this matchup, we've obviously got to assess how both these guys match up stylistically based on recent performances, but we've also got to bear in mind that with the layoffs both these guys are coming into this fight from, they're also probably going to look a lot worse than they have done recently. But of course, you know, that's why they call it gambling. It's impossible to know what to expect from both these guys this weekend, but we do know that they're both probably going to look a lot worse than we've ever seen before. Because we haven't seen Cerrone perform, you know, in around a year. And this fight didn't last very long, so we didn't really get a good look at him against Morono. Prior to that, it was September 2020 when we last got a good look at him in a fight that went the distance against Nico Price. So it's been like 18 months since we got a really good look at Donald Cerrone, and it's been even longer since we saw him compete at lightweight. So who knows what to expect from Cerrone this weekend. But Lauzon is coming into the fight on a far bigger layoff. Last time we saw him was October 2019, but that fight ended in a minute and a half, and he caught Jonathan Pierce in a really bad position early on. So again, that fight doesn't really tell us a lot about where Lauzon is at this stage in his career, because it didn't last very long. So the last time we got a really good look at Lauzon was all the way back in April 2018, which was almost 4 years ago now. And if I was a betting man, which I am, I would bet that Lauzon is going to look significantly worse in 2022 than he did in 2018 against Chris Grushmacher, because back when he fought Grushmacher, he would have been like 33, 34 years old. Now in his late 30s, I don't see any realistic scenario based on what we know about the trajectory of MMA fighters' careers, particularly guys like Lauzon. He's got a lot of miles on the clock. I don't see any way that Lauzon looks better than he did against Grushmacher. I'd actually expect him to have declined a lot over the last 4 years. I understand, it's not a bad idea to take some time off to kind of recover, give the brain a bit of a rest, let those long-term recurring injuries heal a little bit, but not competing for 4 years in your late 30s. There are not many examples in the history of combat sports where guys can take a long layoff from their early 30s, come back in their late 30s and look good. Usually, this story doesn't end well and they end up looking totally shot and a complete shadow of themselves. So when we first began breaking down this fight, I said that I recommended to my community to bet on Donald Cerrone yesterday. And the reason why I recommended a bet on Donald Cerrone was because there's no doubt that both these guys are on a very steep decline and their best days are behind them. And, it's not ever going to be a good idea to bet on guys at this stage in their career. It's never going to be a safe bet is what I'm trying to say, because who knows what version of both guys are going to show up. However, what we can do is make the best decision possible with the information we've got available. And while both guys are definitely on a decline, there's no doubt about that. When you look at both Cerrone and Lauzon's recent fights, it is glaringly obvious to me that Lauzon has declined far more than Donald Cerrone has. Now, we're going to be talking about how these two guys match up from a stylistic point of view for the rest of this breakdown. But if you are interested in betting this fight, I would highly recommend you do your own research. And if you're interested in why I'm betting Cerrone this weekend, what I would recommend you do is go and watch Joe Lauzon's fight from April 2018 against Chris Grushmacher. Then go and watch Donald Cerrone's fight against Nico Price in September 2020. And just pay close attention to the difference in what Cerrone's capable of against Price and what Lauzon is capable of against Grushmacher. Now, the water does get a little bit muddy because, of course, Cerrone fought Nico Price at welterweight, and this fight against Lauzon is at lightweight. So Cerrone could look far worse at lightweight than he did at welterweight against Price, and he most likely will. It's very difficult for him to make that lightweight cut. But if you go and watch Lauzon's fight from 2018 against Grushmacher, he looked so bad against Grushmacher, like totally shot. Like reflexes gone, no power in his hands, slow, doesn't see the shots coming. He looked frail and fragile. Like Lauzon was a complete shell of himself against Grushmacher, and let's be real, Grushmacher is not exactly a dangerous opponent to go up against. And Lauzon was just totally outclassed by Grushmacher. That fight took place in April 2018, which was over 2 years before the Nico Price Donald Cerrone fight took place. When you look at how Cerrone looked against Price and you look at how bad Lauzon looked against Grushmacher, you can never use MMA math, but if you use those fights as a barometer, it is unthinkable to me that Lauzon could be competitive with Cerrone in this fight. Because there's absolutely no way on earth Lauzon would have been able to go the distance with Nico Price. He probably wouldn't have made it out the first couple of minutes. he looked so hittable and so fragile against Grushmacher and took so much damage that, like I say, it's unthinkable to me that he would be able to be competitive with anyone that was able to go the distance with Nico Price, 2 years later, over 2 years later. And that Donald Cerrone fight against Price was pretty competitive. What's really important to take into consideration about that matchup is that it was 4 years ago. And remember what I said earlier in this breakdown. The probability of a guy who's like 33, 34 years old, which is what Lauzon would have been when he fought Grushmacher, taking 4 years off and coming back when he's 37 years old and looking better than he did when he was 33. The probability of that happening is so low. There will always be exceptions to the rule, and maybe Lauzon goes against the trend here, but you'd expect Lauzon to look significantly worse on Saturday night than he did back in 2018. And you'd expect Cerrone to have declined as well. But we saw Cerrone a lot more recently than we saw Lauzon. And the version of Cerrone we saw in 2020 should smoke the version of Cerrone of Lauzon that we saw in 2018. So if Lauzon's going to have declined a lot over the last 4 years, which you would have expect, very, very likely Cerrone completely outclasses him here. So if you're interested in the reasons why I'm betting Cerrone this weekend, just do your own research on this one. Go watch Grushmacher and Lauzon. Go watch Cerrone and Price. Check out those two fights and it'll be glaringly obvious to you if you have eyeballs. If not, you want to take my word for it, let's break this one down. So in terms of grappling, obviously Cerrone very rarely tries to take his opponents down. Occasionally he will. Occasionally he'll try and take his opponents down, but for the most part, Cerrone likes to stand and bang and keep fights standing, even against opponents that it would have been smarter to try and take down. Cerrone's a very high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt with decent takedown offense. I don't recall hardly anyone throughout Cerrone's career causing him a problem on the ground. He's a very high-level grappler. Lauzon, also a very high-level grappler, and of course he was able to use his grappling to catch Jonathan Pierce in a bad position in his last fight and get a stoppage on the ground. Both these guys are very high-level black belts. But at this stage in their careers, Lauzon looks very shot, very flat, has no physicality anymore. And with Cerrone being difficult to take down, hold down, and having a decent ground game, I'd be very surprised if Lauzon were able to get this fight to the ground. If he did get this fight to the ground, I'd be very surprised if he could keep it on the ground. And if he could keep it on the ground for any period of time, because of how good Cerrone is on the ground, I'd be very surprised if Lauzon could cause him a problem there. So when it comes to grappling, I'd actually give Cerrone an advantage here. He's got a better gas tank at this stage in their careers. He's more physically imposing at this stage in their careers, more athletic, high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, decent wrestling. I would give Cerrone the advantage on the ground here. And if you watch Lauzon's fight against Grushmacher, you will see why. But, like I said, Cerrone likes to stand and bang. I don't think Lauzon's going to be able to take Cerrone down and hold him down. Therefore, this is likely to be a stand-up fight because Cerrone possesses the skills to dictate where this matchup takes place. And if this fight takes place on the feet, based on, again, that Grushmacher performance versus the Price performance, Cerrone should be able to light Lauzon up here real bad, do a lot of damage, and very, very likely get the knockout. If you go back and watch Lauzon's performance against Grushmacher, which involved a lot of striking, not only did Lauzon look fragile, flat, sloppy, bad defensively, but he also faded really quickly. So, Lauzon built a career from putting a crazy pace on his opponents and, breaking them with his pressure and aggression, his relentlessness. But Lauzon slowed down significantly after 3-4 minutes against Grushmacher and then was really gassed in round 2. Which is a huge issue because he's already bad defensively, and when he gets tired, he's even worse at defending himself. And we know Cerrone's a slow starter that gets better as fights wear on. So long as Cerrone can make it out of the first round here, which I think he's going to be tough enough to do because Lauzon's not like crazy dangerous on the feet. Cerrone can make it into round 2, based on how tired Lauzon looked at the end of round 1 against Grushmacher and that additional 4 years of athletic decline, I think Cerrone can put on a striking clinic in rounds 2 and 3 here and hurt Lauzon real bad. So I do think Cerrone's a good bet this weekend. Of course, it's never going to be a safe bet. There's no such thing as a safe bet. But when you're betting on guys in the tail end of their career, you know, in their late 30s, there's always going to be a lot of risk there. For all we know, Cerrone could be turning up for one last payday. He could go out there, you know, look like an absolute bum, having barely trained, take one last paycheck, get on the mic and announce his retirement. That's absolutely possible. A lot of fighters do that when they get to the late stage in their career. But if both guys show up and perform, you know, reasonably close to what we've seen from them recently, this should be a cakewalk for Cerrone, and I would expect him to win very comfortably, which is probably why his odds are starting to decline, because a lot of people are probably seeing the same things as me. So, hope you found that breakdown useful. Definitely do your own research on that one though. We now go into talking about the next fight. We're going to be talking about two other guys that are definitely in the tail end of their careers. Ovince St. Preux against Maurizio Shogun Rua. So we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one. We can see that Ovince St. Preux is one of the biggest favourites on the card at average odds of about 1.40, which is going to be minus 250 for an implied probability of 71%. And if we take a look at the odds on Shogun, he's around an average of 3.0, which is going to be plus 200 for an implied probability of 33%. So this is roughly 70-30 in favour of OSP in the eyes of the bookies. And let's take a look at the X factors. So Ovince St. Preux is 39 years old, 6'3" with an 80-inch reach, and Shogun 40 years old, 6'1" with a 76-inch reach. So bit of a size and reach advantage there for Ovince St. Preux. Both guys definitely in the tail end of their career, around about 40 years old. And again, just like with Cerrone and Lauzon, we've seen big decline in both OSP and Shogun, and at this stage in their careers, you'd expect them to look even worse on Saturday night. Fighters at this stage in their careers don't get better, so I'd be expecting OSP and Shogun to both look pretty bad on Saturday night. Shogun is obviously very powerful, very strong, very physically imposing, and those are some of the last things that go as you start to get older. So even though OSP will be declining a lot at this stage in his career, I feel that Shogun is much flatter, much more shot than he used to be. Doesn't really have that aggression or athleticism like he used to. Therefore, I do believe the decline at this stage in their careers has hit Shogun far harder than it has hit OSP, which is probably one of the reasons why OSP is the big favourite in this one, right? He's definitely declining, but hasn't declined as much as Shogun, and is not on as steep of a downward trajectory as Shogun. You know, OSP's got the slight size advantage, definitely has the power advantage, and still has the power to, you know, win the fight with one shot, right? Legit one shot KO power in every strike, which is big, because at this stage in Shogun's career, he can't take a shot like he used to. He's a little bit fragile, bad defensively, very hittable, and in his last fight, tapped the strikes against Paul Craig, which is kind of unthinkable when you look back at Shogun's career and consider how much of a fearless warrior he was. You know, the thought of Shogun tapping the strikes is unthinkable, you know, going back just 5 years. But in terms of how these two guys match up from a stylistic point of view, it is an interesting matchup, because for all of Shogun's weaknesses at this stage in his career, you know, with him being shot and flat and fragile and bad defensively and unable to take a shot like he used to, what we do still know about Shogun is that he still has the heart of a lion, still has that will to win, and he is still, you know, tough as nails. And Shogun's style has never really changed, which is probably why he's found things so hard recently, because he hasn't evolved. You know, you look at a guy like Glover Teixeira, you know, throughout the majority of his career, he was a guy that would just come forward, apply relentless pressure to his opponents, and look to just box him up, right? He would stand right in front of him in that phone booth range and look to exchange. And then as he got older and he couldn't do that anymore because his reflexes started to go and he became easier to hit and not as able to take a shot as he could throughout his career when he was in his prime, you started to see Glover incorporate more grappling into his overall strategies, and that's how Glover evolved. to, develop a new style of fighting that was better suited towards where he was at, in the later stages of his career. Shogun has incorporated a bit more grappling into his fights than you'd see, when he was in his prime, but he hasn't really adjusted his style or strategy that much, and so Shogun still comes out, takes control of the centre of the octagon, and looks to break his opponents with pressure. But the problem with Shogun is he can't take a shot like he used to, so he can't sustain that pressure like he used to without taking big damage and getting hurt pretty bad. But what's interesting about Shogun continuing to try and use that pressure fighting style, that aggression, is that style of fighting is actually kryptonite for a guy like Ovin St. Preux, and it's actually the style that you need to use to cause a guy like OSP big problems, because we know that OSP is one of those guys that will fade very, very quickly if you force him to work hard. If you don't let OSP pace himself, if you walk him down, force him to engage, force him to defend takedowns, force him to exchange, he will fade extremely quickly, like after 3 or 4 minutes. The problem is you have to put yourself in a lot of danger to do that, because you have to stand right in front of him, get into exchanges with him, force him to let his hands go, and by doing that you run the risk of being knocked out, because even at this stage in his career he's a very dangerous striker that carries big, legit one-shot KO power in every strike. However, if you can weather that early storm, if you can make it through the first 3-4 minutes of the fight and make OSP work extremely hard in that first 3-4 minutes, in rounds 2 and 3 he does become a little bit of a pussycat. He becomes far less dangerous, far less powerful, his volume falls off a cliff, there's nowhere near as much power in his hands, and he becomes very sloppy, very bad defensively. And so what's interesting about this matchup is it is a difficult fight for Shogun, because OSP has legit one-shot KO power, and at this stage in Shogun's career he's very fragile, can't take a shot like he used to, he's very bad defensively. But Shogun's tough, and he's not easy to put away, and he will keep fighting till his last breath. And so if he can find a way to turn round 1 into a typical Shogun fight, which is like a crazy brawl, insanely chaotic, if he can do that and drag OSP into a crazy chaotic brawl in round 1 and survive that crazy chaotic brawl, no matter how bad Shogun does in round 1, there's a real good chance that OSP will fade hard in round 2 and 3, which opens the door for Shogun to then take over. So it is an interesting fight, because I do understand why OSP is the favourite. The first round here is likely to be very dicey for Shogun. OSP is very dangerous, and of course Shogun's pretty easy to take down, not the best on the ground either, and we know OSP has a heavy top game, he's able to inflict a lot of damage with ground and pound. OSP's got a nasty submission game as well. So if the fight goes to the ground's bad news for Shogun there. Early though, Shogun's in a lot of trouble in this fight, standing up and on the ground early. But the longer the fight goes, I think the better it gets for Shogun. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand me. I'm not saying Shogun is some kind of cardio machine that's going to be able to outwork OSP by a huge margin, because part of Shogun's decline is that he also fades hard as fights wear on. He used to be a cardio machine, but he's not anymore. He can't push the same kind of pace that he used to. However, Shogun is far better at pushing through the tiredness and performing a lot closer to his full potential when tired than OSP is. So what I mean by that is, as the fight goes, both these guys are going to fade a lot into the second and third round. They're both going to fade a lot. But Shogun is far better at pushing through that tiredness than OSP is. When OSP gets tired, his volume falls off a cliff, his hand speed slows down, he's got nowhere near as much power in his hands, and he becomes very sloppy and bad defensively. Those same things affect Shogun, but he's far better at pushing through. He's still aggressive, he's still going for the win, He's the kind of guy that'll bite down in the on the mouthpiece and still try to kill you, no matter how tired he gets. Whereas OSP is far more prone to kind of checking out mentally and going into a defensive shell when he gets tired. So from a betting point of view, it's an interesting fight. It's not the kind of fight I want to bet. There's no way I would bet OSP as a big favourite because he's on a decline and he does fade a lot as fights wear on. I think if Shogun does make it past round 1, Shogun can make this very interesting. But I don't want to bet Shogun in this fight because round 1's likely to be real rough for him. OSP carries true legit one-shot KO power, and it doesn't take much to push Shogun away at this stage in his career. And we know OSP's got big advantages on the ground when both these guys are fresh as well. So, for me, I don't see a strong position on either of these fighters. I think no matter who you bet in this matchup, you're taking on a lot of risk. However, if you really do want to bet this fight for a little bit of action, I do think this is dog or pass. There's no way I would bet OSP, at these odds. Even though he's more likely to win, there's just no value there at an implied probability of 71%. You're just not getting a very good risk to reward ratio at odds of 1.40 minus 250. Shogun, while very risky, gives you a far better risk to reward ratio as the underdog. I would take him bullet to my head if you really want to bet this fight. But the best thing to do on this one, in my opinion, is pass. So we now go into talking about the next fight, which is going to be Michael Chandler against Tony Ferguson. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Chandler is the favourite at odds of 1.25, which is minus 400 for an implied probability of 80%, which makes Chandler the biggest favourite on the card. The odds on Ferguson are around an average of 4.0, which is plus 300 for an implied probability of 25%. So Chandler, an absolutely massive favourite here, and based on recent performances, you can absolutely see why. So Chandler, 36 years old, 5'8" with a 71.5 inch reach. Tony Ferguson, 38 years old, 5'11" with a 76 inch reach. So we've spoken a lot in this video already with the fighters that we've covered about how, as fighters approach their late 30s, they're going to start to decline significantly from fight to fight. And Chandler and Ferguson are no different. We've obviously seen major signs of decline in Tony Ferguson in his recent fights. Haven't seen, really glaringly obvious signs of decline in Chandler so far. But there are definitely clues that Chandler is also on a steep decline based on his performances over the last 2-3 years. Of course, we'll talk about what those signs are in this breakdown video. But with Chandler being 36 years old, Ferguson being, 37 years old, right? 38 years old. In the lightweight division, Chandler and Ferguson are very old for lightweights. We know that the younger weight classes are all about speed, reflexes and athleticism. These are some of the first things to go as you start to get older. Now, if we talk about the decline that we've seen in both these guys, in the case of Ferguson, he has obviously looked totally shot in his recent matchups against Oliveira, Gaethje and Beneil Dariush. That shouldn't come as a surprise. 38 years old for a lightweight is very old. He's had over 30 pro fights, and on top of that, Ferguson's been in a lot of wars. He's taken a lot of damage throughout his career. Ferguson's strategy throughout his career was basically to, Homer Simpson guys, right? To go, full Rocky in Rocky 4. Go out there, take a beating in the fight, wear guys down, and then take over in the second half of the fight. So Tony's taken an enormous amount of damage, in those 31 pro fights that he's had in his career. And so no surprise that in his late 30s, he's starting to look as shot as he is. And he's going to be getting worse from fight to fight as well. Very unlikely Ferguson's going to look any better than he has done in his recent matchups. And at this stage in Ferguson's career, he looks flat and frail and fragile and just doesn't have any physicality or athleticism to him anymore, to the point where there's no power in his hands and he gets ragdolled on the ground. It's very sad to see. Ferguson's one of my favourite fighters ever. But as we know, there's no happy endings in MMA. And, this is how the story ends for fighters that continue to fight on in the UFC until their late 30s. It's sad to see, but it is a cycle that we've seen played out over and over and over and over and over again over the 26, 27 years that the UFC's been in business. So Ferguson is ticking every box in the book when it comes to signs of a major decline. Chandler's also on a pretty major decline, but the signs of Chandler's decline are a lot more subtle. When you look at Chandler's decline, the biggest issue with Chandler is his chin. If you go and watch maybe Chandler's last 10 fights, you'll find that he's been rocked, dropped, wobbled, or knocked down in almost all of them. Now, for sure, he's faced some pretty, devastating power punches in his last 10 fights. Guys like Justin Gaethje and Pitbull as an example. No shame in getting rocked by those guys. But we've also seen lower level fighters like Brent Primus wobble Chandler multiple times off jabs. Chandler is very chinny, and I just think that is a side effect of all the wars that he's been in his career. He's had almost 30 pro fights. For the vast majority of his career, he's been consistently competing against some of the best fighters in the world. From pretty much day one, Chandler was competing in Strikeforce and then went straight into Bellator. And you can see he's fighting guys like Patricky Pitbull and Eddie Alvarez before he's even had 10 pro fights. So Chandler's had a real tough career. He's been in a lot of wars. He's taken a lot of damage. In his early 20s, he's literally getting into crazy wild brawls against Eddie Alvarez, some of the best fights of all time. But taking that kind of damage early in your career isn't good, and it's going to add up and take its toll. And so I just don't think Chandler can take a shot like he used to. Now, some of you watching this may be like, well, hang on a minute. How can you say that? His chin held up against Gaethje. He went the distance, and Gaethje is one of the scariest power punchers in the division, which is absolutely true. I will not disagree with you. But it is worth noting that he did get rocked 3 or 4 times in that fight by Gaethje. And to be honest with you, I can't explain what happened in the Gaethje fight. It was very anomalous. The shots that he was able to take against Gaethje blew me away, to be honest with you. Because, like I say, if you go back and watch Chandler's last 10 fights, he has been wobbled multiple times off jabs from various guys, and it usually takes far less to knock Chandler out. So he's had a tough career, and at 36 years old, you'd expect him to be declining from fight to fight. So I don't think it's going to take much to put Chandler away. Fortunately for Chandler, if Ferguson's recent fights are anything to go by, he looks far too fragile to be able to make Chandler pay for that weakness. But you never know, man. MMA's a crazy sport, and it only takes one shot. What I will also say about Ferguson is he certainly seems very motivated coming into this fight. He's obviously spoken very openly this week about his... how do I word it? He's not very happy with the UFC. Let's put it that way. He's obviously got an issue over fighter pay. I think it was a thinly veiled way of him kind of talking out loud about how he can't afford to retire comfortably. So he's definitely got a chip on his shoulder. Seems very motivated. So who knows how he could look this weekend. What's very interesting about this matchup is similar to how we spoke about with the Shogun versus OSP fight. Tony Ferguson's entire body of work throughout his career is the exact style that you need to cause Michael Chandler a problem. Because if you go back and study Michael Chandler's career, there is a trend that plays out quite often throughout his career where he comes out the gate very hard, very aggressive, very recklessly in round 1, and just looks to overwhelm his opponents and catch them cold. He's obviously got big power in his hands, devastating knockout artist. So when he starts fast, he obviously stands a great chance of catching his opponents cold and knocking him out early. But then on top of that, he's also a former NCAA Division 1 level wrestler, so he can ragdoll guys to the ground as well and control them on the ground easily. But Chandler's problem has always been that he comes out the gate extremely hard. And we've seen this in his UFC fights, right? His performance against Dan Hooker came out the gate super hard, got a quick knockout. Same with Charles Oliveira. That fight was a crazy war. That first round was insane. And obviously we all know how the Gaethje fight went. The first round was insane there as well. And this is something that Chandler's done throughout his career. He just comes out the gate sprinting, throws everything that he's got at his opponents in round 1, and then fades very hard in rounds 2 and 3. Chandler's very prone to adrenaline dumping, and he's far worse in round 2 and 3 than he is in round 1. Now, based on their recent performances, I think Chandler is still going to be far too good for Ferguson in rounds 2 and 3. Because Ferguson's obviously looked very shot in his recent fights against Oliveira, Gaethje, and Beneil Dariush. Whereas Chandler, for all of his weaknesses, still has that crazy physicality and that crazy power to his game. You know, we spoke in the case of OSP where we said power was the last thing to go. And that's definitely going to help Chandler here, because even if he does adrenaline dump and get tired after round 1, because he's so tough, because he's such a dog, chances are he can compensate for that just by falling back on his wrestling, you know, taking Ferguson down and controlling him on the ground, which, as we saw in Ferguson's recent fights against Oliveira and Dariush, is not a particularly difficult thing to do anymore. Ferguson's very physically weak, very frail. It's very easy to take him down and hold him down at this stage in his career. So even if Chandler did come out the gate early, very aggressive, burn himself out in adrenaline dump like he has done quite a few times in the past, he probably still has enough left to beat Ferguson. So this is one of those fights where, like we just said, on the ground, you'd have to give Chandler quite a big advantage with how weak Ferguson is off his back these days. And standing up, Ferguson's just not going to be able to match the power and the physicality, the speed and the explosiveness of Chandler. And with how bad defensively, how slow, how frail Ferguson has looked in his recent fights, you'd expect him to be a sitting duck to, you know, the threat of Chandler's knockout. You look at Chandler, right? He starched Dan Hooker, he knocked down Charles Oliveira, he landed absolute bombs on Gaethje. I just don't see Ferguson at this stage in his career being able to deal with that. But unfortunately, Chandler's odds reflect this. He is the biggest favourite on the card, and at an implied probability of 80%, there's really no value in betting Chandler here. Chandler has big advantages in this matchup, but I feel his advantages are baked into the odds. And so for me, this fight is an easy pass where I don't see a strong position on either side. I do think Chandler wins a very high percentage of the time, but I don't want to be betting a guy in this odds range at an implied probability of 80% that is prone to adrenaline dumping and that is a little bit chinny. Because ultimately, it only takes one shot to land clean and hard to knock someone out. And we've seen Chandler wobbled off jabs, you know, by guys that are not very good. On top of that, Ferguson is very tough still, is very difficult to put away still, and has always had good cardio. So if Chandler does come out the gate very hard, doesn't show Ferguson respect, tries to take Ferguson out in round 1, MMA is a crazy sport. Maybe Chandler does adrenaline dump, and maybe Ferguson does roll back the years a little bit, you know, look a little bit better than he has over the last few years, and can kind of take over in rounds 2 and 3 and cause Chandler a bit of a problem in rounds 2 and 3 if Chandler does tire and adrenaline dump and fade. It's very unlikely, but it's a risk factor that can't be ignored, and a risk factor that is tangible enough for me to not want to bet Chandler in this odds range. There's very little upside to betting a guy in this odds range. You know, these odds don't get me excited. But on the flip side, this is an awful, awful stylistic matchup for Ferguson. I'd expect Chandler to win very easily, therefore I'm not interested in taking a shot on Ferguson as a big underdog either. So I hope you found that breakdown video useful. You probably didn't. You probably already knew everything I was going to say there, but we cover it anyway. We tick it off the list. Now let me have a quick drinky poo. My hair, I need a haircut, man. I've had COVID, right? So I haven't been able to go to the barber. So I had COVID, which is also why I haven't been uploading videos recently. And now my barber's gone on holiday. So now let's talk about the fight between Carla Esparza and Rose Namajunas. So we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one. We can see that Rose is the favourite at average odds of about, I would say, 1.48. which is going to be minus 208 for an implied probability of 68%. And if we take a look at the odds on Carla Esparza, she is around an average of 2.75, which is plus 175 for an implied probability of 36%. So Carla Esparza is 34 years old, 5'1" with a 63-inch reach. Rose Namajunas, 29 years old, 5'5" with a 65-inch reach. So first X factor to focus on is the age of Esparza. We've already spoken a lot about age and the rate at which fighters decline in this breakdown video. And for 34 years old, that's very old for a strawweight. Strawweight is the lightest weight class in the UFC, and we know that the lighter weight classes are all about speed, reflexes and athleticism. So at 34 years old, Esparza is very old for strawweight. On the other side of the coin, Namajunas is in her absolute prime at 29 years old. She should be at her best, she should be improving from fight to fight, and athletically she should be in the best shape she's ever been in her entire life. So two fighters on opposite career trajectories. Namajunas should be getting better from fight to fight at her absolute best, whereas Esparza should be declining from fight to fight. Rose will also have a bit of a size and reach advantage here. She'll be taller than Carla and have a bit of a reach advantage, which is huge for a fighter like Rose because she's very good at using that reach. She knows how to fight long. She knows how to use that reach advantage. And so when you get a fighter like Rose with a slight height and reach advantage, that's huge. You know, that just accentuates those dimensions because Rose really knows what to do with those advantages. This is obviously a classic striker versus grappler matchup. Carla Esparza is the grappler and Rose is the striker. Of course, Rose is a lot more well-rounded than Carla. She can hang on the ground. We see, Rose use grappling from time to time. Grappling was a big reason why she beat Weili Zhang in her last fight. But for the most part, you'd expect Rose to be wanting to keep this fight on the feet, where she has a big advantage over Carla. And you'd expect Carla to want to get this fight to the ground. So a big part of this breakdown is going to be focusing on what is the probability that Carla is going to be able to take Rose down and hold her down. And of course, what's very interesting about this matchup is that it's obviously a rematch of the first ever strawweight title fight between Carla Esparza and Rose Namajunas. A fight that a long time ago, all the way back in 2014, Carla Esparza won by rear naked choke. But of course, a lot has changed since then. I don't feel that Carla Esparza has evolved at all since that fight back in 2014. For the most part, Carla's still the same fighter she was back in 2014, whereas Rose has got a lot better. The biggest improvements that I've seen to Rose have been the mental side of the game. GSP famously said that fighting is 90% mental. And you've really seen a lot of growth from Rose in this area. When you go back and watch her first fight against Carla, Carla basically broke her just by pressure and just wearing her down. And Rose kind of quit in that fight. And this was an issue that we saw with Rose throughout the early stages of her career, where as soon as the going gets tough, she would kind of fade and check out mentally. But we've seen big turning points in Rose's career where she's been able to go 5 hard rounds with, Ioane and Jacek, and she's had her nose crushed by Jessica Andrade and still managed to just survive and see her through to the end of the fight, whereas there's no way Rose would have been able to do that earlier in her career. She would have curled up in a ball and looked for a way out. And of course, she was in a 5-round war with Weili Zhang in her last fight. So Rose is so much more mentally strong than she was earlier in her career when she first fought Carla for the strawweight title. And that's huge because Carla, for the most part, is the same fighter she's always been, whereas Rose has evolved so much. She's so much more mentally strong, is able to now push through when she gets tired and knows how to pace herself and has the experience to fight through, any bad position that she's put in, which makes her a far more difficult opponent for Carla Esparza this time around. But what does make this an interesting fight is that Rose Namajunas' takedown defense is particularly bad, which is quite surprising because she is a skilled grappler. She obviously used grappling to win her fight against Weili Zhang in her last matchup. But if you go and look at Rose's takedown defense, it isn't good. It is very easy to take her down. And Rose is one of these fighters that is pretty heavy and pretty nasty if she takes you down and gets you into top position. But if Rose is on her back, she's actually incredibly weak off her back, and she doesn't do a lot off her back, and she's not very good at working her way back up to her feet. So this is interesting because one of Rose's biggest weaknesses is obviously one of Carla's biggest strengths. And now you may be listening to me say this and be thinking, I didn't think Rose's takedown offense was that bad. How can you say this? But if you look at Rose's MMA record, it actually tells an interesting story, because we know that Carla was able to take Rose down and out-hustle her relatively easily the first time they fought. And since then, Rose hasn't really fought any strong grapplers. Her last two fights were against Weili Zhang. Now, a lot of people rate Weili Zhang very highly, but if I'm being brutally honest with you as someone that bets on MMA for a living, Weili Zhang is not a very good grappler. And so what Rose was able to do, to Zhang on the ground doesn't really impress me that much. Weili Zhang is not a good wrestler. And so we didn't see a whole lot of Rose's takedown offense and deficiencies on the ground being tested in those fights. Jessica Andrade didn't really try to take Rose down. In this fight, what's interesting is Jessica Andrade literally picked Rose up and threw her to the ground like a child. She won the fight by slam. This is a big red flag for me because, have you ever seen guys with really good takedown defense get picked up in the ground like a child and slammed to the ground? It just doesn't happen. I can never imagine someone like Joanna Jędrzejczyk with elite takedown defense getting picked up in the air and slammed to the ground like Rose did by Andrade. There's not a massive difference in body type between Jędrzejczyk and Rose, and yet there's a big difference in their takedown defense and defensive grappling. So that's a huge red flag to me, because the way that Andrade was able to pick Rose up and just toss her to the ground highlights a big lack of physicality to Rose's grappling. She then fought Jędrzejczyk, obviously a striker, Michelle Waterson, striker, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, striker, Tisha Torres, striker, Paige Van Zandt is a grappler, but obviously a very low-level grappler, Angela Hill's a striker, and then look, we're already back at Rose's debut, that title fight that she lost against Carla Esparza. So if you look at all of Rose's fights since she fought Carla Esparza, hasn't really fought any strong wrestlers who have, really been able to test Rose's takedown offense and potentially expose a huge weakness that Rose has in her overall skill set. The fighters that she's been competing against have perhaps masked a huge weakness that she has. Could Carla be the first opponent she's faced in a long time who can potentially expose that big weakness of having bad takedown offense and being very weak off her back? Who knows? But I doubt it. And the reason why I doubt Carla's going to be able to expose this huge, hidden weakness in Rose's skill set is because Carla is a very predictable fighter. She's a very easy fighter to game plan for. All of Carla's fights are the same. All her performances are the same. You know that she's not interested in striking. She poses no threat on the feet to someone like Rose. Carla has no power in her hands, and she's not even going to look to engage that much on the feet anyway. We know that Carla likes to maintain a really big distance between her and her opponent, to the point where they have to cover a lot of distance to be able to get close enough to Carla to land. Carla likes to fight all the way out of a range where she can be hit to the very extreme, where when you see her on Saturday night, there's going to be a very big distance between her and Namajunas that she's going to look to maintain. And what you'll see from Carla is she'll spend the first 3 or 4 minutes of every round bouncing around on the outside, and occasionally she'll blitz forward with a straight punch, karate style striking combination before retreating and going back to the outside, where she'll continue to circle away from her opponents. She'll do that for the first 3-4 minutes of every round. And then in the final minute, minute and a half, final 2 minutes of every round, she'll commit really hard to a takedown, look to get her opponent to the ground, then end the round with a takedown and in a dominant position. She uses this strategy because she understands that judges score rounds in favour of the fighter to finish the round the strongest, so long as the first half of the round is relatively competitive. So Esparza understands the importance of finishing rounds strong, and that's why at the business end of the round, that's when she puts her foot in the on the gas and gets going. The only time you'll see Carla deviate from this strategy is when she's given no option other than to grapple sooner. So when her opponents may be putting a lot of pressure on her on the feet in those first 3-4 minutes of each round, or she takes big damage, or her opponents walk her down and they're able to cut the octagon off, get inside and land on her very easily. At that point, she's forced to grapple earlier in rounds to alleviate that pressure her opponents are putting on her, or if her opponents try to take her down and force her to grapple. But if her opponent is struggling to get to her on the feet because she's refusing to engage, she's bouncing around on the outside, or if her opponents don't try to take her down, she's going to bounce around and avoid engaging. That makes her very predictable. When you fight Carla, there's no surprises. You know exactly what she's going to do. And if a guy like me, a geek that sits in his pants all day watching fights for a living, can work out what Carla's bringing to the table, then a very high-level elite athlete like Rose can easily do the same thing, and obviously Rose's team can easily do the same thing. She's got a great coach, a great trainer behind her in Trevor Whitman. So there's no surprises here. Rose and Whitman are going to know exactly what to expect from Carla, and for that reason, you'd expect them to be very well prepared. You'd expect them to have a game plan and a strategy mapped out to neutralize every threat that Carla poses to her. And so, even though Rose's takedown defense is not good, and Carla is a very good offensive wrestler, it is unthinkable to me that Rose wouldn't be able to develop a strategy for this fight to cause Carla big problems, because Rose will know exactly what to expect from Carla, and there's no surprises in here. So that level of predictability makes Esparza very easy to deal with for an elite fighter like Rose. Having said that, there are fighters, really good fighters as well, that will go their whole careers without ever improving their takedown defense. And it doesn't matter what coaches they work with, what trainers they work with, what gym they train at. Throughout their whole careers, for whatever reason, just a lack of balance, or I don't know what it is, maybe it's in their DNA, but for whatever reason, their whole careers, they are just easy to take down and easy to hold down. It is possible that that is the case with Rose. It's very possible that's the case with Rose. But because we haven't seen her fight any strong wrestlers since 2014, it's inconclusive and we don't know for sure. It is unthinkable to me that someone as good as Rose would run into trouble against someone as predictable as Carla, with the team that Rose has got behind her and all the amazing things that Rose has achieved in her career and how good she is. But there are some fighters that just cannot defend a takedown and are just super weak off their back, and I wouldn't rule Rose falling into that category, as crazy as it sounds. So this is a really good stylistic matchup for Rose because she knows what to expect from Carla, and if she can keep the fight standing, this is going to be an absolute cakewalk for her. What I would also say about Carla is, because she's got that small, compact body type, her top control isn't very good. Her body type is one of those things that both helps her and hinders her. Her body type, where she's got that small, compact, low center of gravity, makes her a really good offensive wrestler because she's able to shoot in nice and deep on her opponent's hips and complete those takedowns. But because she's very small and compact, she doesn't have the best grappling control and doesn't have the heaviest top game, which is another reason why it's very unlikely Rose loses this, because even if Rose does get taken down, it shouldn't be too hard for her to work her way back up to her feet. So this is a really interesting fight. I do think that Rose wins a very high percentage of the time because of all of the reasons that I've explained in this breakdown. But for me, at these odds, there's just no upside in betting Rose. She's too big of a favourite. The fact that we haven't really seen a lot of her takedown offence since 2014 is a big enough risk factor to scare me off betting Rose as a big favourite, even though I do think Rose wins a very high percentage of the time here. And if you are looking for action and you are looking to bet this fight, I would definitely bet Rose. If you must bet this fight, take Rose. I'm not interested in betting Carla because, like I say, she is so predictable. You'd think Rose would come into the fight with a game plan strategy to neutralise everything that Esparza tries to do. But ultimately, Rose's biggest weakness just so happens to, Rose's biggest weakness can be exploited by Carla's biggest strength. Therefore, it is not smart to bet Rose at big favourite odds. Having said that, for all the reasons I've already explained, Carla as a big underdog is not interesting to me either. So I'm passing on this fight, but I do expect Rose to win a pretty big percentage of the time. Unfortunately, her odds do reflect that. So we will now break down the main event of the evening. Charles Oliveira against Justin Gaethje in what is a very, very interesting fight. So let's start off by taking a look at the odds on this one. So we can see that Charles Oliveira is the favourite at average odds of about 1.59, which is going to be minus 169 for an implied probability of 63%. And if we take a look at the odds on Justin Gaethje, he is around an average of 2.45, which is plus 145 for an implied probability of 41%. So Charles Oliveira is 32 years old, 5'10", with 74-inch reach, and Justin Gaethje is 33 years old, 5'11", with a 70-inch reach. So both guys roughly about the same age, roughly about the same size. The only notable difference is obviously that 4-inch reach advantage for Oliveira, which, to be fair, he is good at using. He throws nice long kicks, nice long straight punches. Oliveira is a long, tall fighter that does use his length very well. So where do we begin with this one? This is a very, very deep fight for us to delve into. I want to start off by talking a bit about the odds on this one, because I do think the odds are off on this fight, and I do think Justin Gaethje is worth a bet. Not because I'm particularly confident that Justin Gaethje is going to win, or because I think that Gaethje is, very likely to win or anything like that. It's because I just think the odds are off on this matchup. When you research this fight and take everything into consideration, I think this is a 50-50 fight. I don't lean one way or the other confidently at all. I think this is a fight that could very much go either way. And so, with Oliveira being the favourite, Gaethje being a decent-sized underdog, it's just a no-brainer for me to bet the underdog in a matchup like this, in a fight that I feel is razor close, 50-50, could go either way. I don't think Gaethje's going to win any more confidently than I think Oliveira is going to. Flip of a coin, if I can get either of these guys as a big underdog or a relatively big underdog, I'm going to take it. So what I'm trying to say to you is, I don't feel at all confident that Gaethje is going to win this weekend, but like I always say, you've got to let the odds do the work for you, and the odds are telling me to bet Gaethje in this fight based on my research showing me that this fight is a coin flip that could go either way. If Charles Oliveira was the underdog, if the odds were the other way round and Gaethje was the favourite and Oliveira was a 2.5 plus 150 underdog, I would bet Oliveira. What I'm trying to say to you is I have no preference in this fight. I don't know who wins. It could go either way. But the fact that I can get dog odds on Gaethje, $150 return for every 100 I put up in a coin flip situation, that's a very good risk to reward ratio. So I do think Gaethje is a good bet in this fight. It's a very risky bet because the fight could go either way. Both these guys are very dangerous. Both of them are well positioned to exploit the other's weaknesses, and I expect this matchup to be absolute chaos. If anyone feels, if you run into anyone that feels really confident on either one of these guys, run a mile. There's no way you can feel confident on this fight. Both these guys are two ultra skilled, super high level, fighters at the very top of their game. And who knows how this one's going to go. It's all going to come down to on the night who performs best. But it's an incredible matchup for all the reasons that I'm going to get into now. So we'll start off with grappling, because I expect the majority of this fight to take place on the feet. Striking, the way these two guys match up on the feet is a lot more complex than how they match up on the ground. So let's start off with grappling. So what's really interesting about this fight is that both these guys are primarily grapplers. Charles Oliveira has a base in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's a very high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And Justin Gaethje is obviously a former NCAA Division I level wrestler. But what's interesting is both these guys have used their grappling as a base to develop very high-level striking. But two completely different styles of striking, where Charles Oliveira's got that traditional Muay Thai, old school Shuto box style, and Justin Gaethje a very boxing-based heavy style of fighting. Now, both these guys are grapplers, but it's fair to say Justin Gaethje's going to want to keep this fight on the feet, whereas Charles Oliveira would absolutely love this fight to go to the ground. Because even though Gaethje is a former NCAA Division I level wrestler, I think you've got to give Oliveira the advantage if this fight goes to the ground. And Oliveira is not only nasty on the ground, but his offensive wrestling at this stage in his career is pretty good. And the reason why Oliveira's offensive wrestling is really good is because he uses his striking. Past, Oliveira would struggle to get fights to the ground because he didn't have the striking to set up his takedowns, but now he does. And so Oliveira's style is to overwhelm his opponents, to come out super aggressive and throw a high volume of strikes at them, a really diverse range of attacks, kicks, knees down the middle, jabs, hooks, power punches, elbows. He throws every single limb that he has at his opponents, and every single shot that he throws carries true legit one-shot KO power, fight-ending power. And when his opponents are then thinking about defending themselves from the relentless attacks that he's throwing at them on the feet, he can then level change, shoot in really nice and deep on his opponent's hips and drag him to the ground. And so how dangerous Oliveira is of a striker now makes him a far more effective grappler. But Justin Gaethje is extremely difficult to take down, and if you do get him down, he's very, very scrambly. He's difficult to hold down. It's never going to be easy to take down a former NCAA Division I level wrestler, and Gaethje's absolutely no different. Now, the way you cause Gaethje problems on the ground is that you wear him out, you get him tired first, and then he becomes a lot easier to take down and hold down. But when he's fresh, he is very, very difficult to take down and hold down. So as much as Charles Oliveira is a very good offensive wrestler, unless he were able to score a knockdown early and then were able to jump on top of Gaethje, or Oliveira was able to, initiate Gaethje into slipping or something like that, unless something crazy like a knockdown or a slip happens, it's very unlikely Oliveira is going to be able to get this fight to the ground early, because Gaethje is very difficult to take down and hold down. If the fight does go to the ground, I think Oliveira is going to have a big advantage. I think he's going to be able to tie Gaethje up in knots. Very high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, fast back takes, heavy top game. He's an absolute nightmare on the ground. Gaethje needs to treat the ground like lava here. But early on, as we've said, it will not be easy for Oliveira to get this fight to the ground. And so I would expect the early stages of this fight, the first round or two, to take place on the feet, which moves us nicely into talking about how these two guys match up from a striking perspective. And on the feet, I definitely give Gaethje the advantage. I love Charles Oliveira's striking. Like I say, he's got that vintage Shuto box style. comes forward, stands right in front of his opponents in a phone booth, hands up high, chin tucked, and just throws every single limb that he's got at his opponent. Knees up the middle, head kicks, leg kicks, body kicks, jabs, hooks, elbows, everything, spinning attacks. Oliveira overwhelms his opponent with volume and a very diverse range of attacks, which makes him an absolute nightmare to deal with. And I'd say at this stage in his career, his striking is just as good as his ground game. He's extremely dangerous when it comes to striking. But Oliveira's big weakness is that he doesn't move his head at all. He's very bad defensively. When he stood in front of his opponents, he's overwhelming them with attacks, but he's not really considering what's coming back in his direction in terms of counters. And he is a sitting duck to eat in big counter shots. He just doesn't move his head. He's very bad defensively. And of course, this is not good when you're going up against a guy like Justin Gaethje that has great boxing, true legit one-shot KO power in every strike, and a tremendous ability to work his way inside and do really well in boxing range with big combinations. I'd also say that Gaethje is a lot more durable than Oliveira. He's got a better chin than Oliveira. So with both these guys liking to pressure their opponents, neither of them is going to want to take a backward step. They're both pressure fighters. When they meet in the middle and clash and exchange early, which is inevitably going to happen, you'd bet on Gaethje's chin and toughness and durability over Oliveira's every single day of the week. But Gaethje also has other ways that he can cause Oliveira trouble on the feet. We've already said that Oliveira is bad defensively, and don't get me wrong, Gaethje is bad defensively as well. But Gaethje can take a shot, roll with the punches, dog it out far more effectively than Oliveira can. So Oliveira's bad defense is far more of an issue for Oliveira than Gaethje's bad defense is for Gaethje. But there are other ways in which Gaethje can cause Oliveira big problems. If you go and watch Oliveira's recent fights, he's obviously got that lean, lanky, skinny frame, really skinny legs, and he stands right in front of his opponents in a phone booth, heavy on that lead leg. And we know that Justin Gaethje, one of his biggest weapons are the leg kicks, the power that he can generate with his leg kicks, the speed, the accuracy in which he lands them with are absolutely devastating. Gaethje's got the kind of leg kicks where he can stop a guy with, after 4 or 5 of them landing clean and hard. And Oliveira is going to be a sitting duck to those leg kicks because of the way that he stands right in front of his opponents. He's not in and out. He's not elusive. He's not switching stances. He's not light on his feet. He stands right in front of his opponents. And Gaethje has got no telegraph, no wind-up with the leg kicks. He can uncork them so quickly, with so much power, with so much accuracy. These leg kicks could be a huge factor in this fight. Because if Gaethje starts attacking the legs of Oliveira early and often, when Gaethje inevitably does start to slow down in that 3rd, 4th and 5th round, Oliveira may not be able to make Gaethje pay for slowing down in that 3rd, 4th and 5th round if his legs are so beat up that he's not as mobile as he'd like to be, or he's had to switch stances and fight, and he's not able to generate the same drive on his takedown attempts as he would be able to with healthy legs, because obviously it's difficult to generate a lot of drive on takedowns if your legs are completely smashed up through leg kicks. So the leg kicks of Justin Gaethje are a massive weapon that he can use in this matchup to make it much more difficult for Oliveira to cause him problems later in the fight when Gaethje will inevitably slow down. Because obviously one of the biggest weaknesses with Gaethje is that he does slow down a lot as fights wear on. But what's interesting about this fight is that in order for Oliveira to get Gaethje tired in this fight, Oliveira is going to have to force Gaethje to engage. So remember earlier on in the breakdown videos where we were talking about how if you make OSP work really hard, OSP will fade hard. Well, Gaethje is the same. But how do you make a guy work really hard? Well, you force them to engage. You force them to let their hands go. You force them to exert energy. And that's why this is a potentially really tough fight for Oliveira, because if he forces Gaethje to work and forces Gaethje to exert energy and forces Gaethje to exchange, Well, what does that look like? That probably looks like Gaethje throwing a whole lot of leg kicks, which isn't good for Oliveira because Oliveira is very susceptible to leg kicks. And it probably looks like Gaethje letting his hands go and loading up on a lot of big power strikes, which is also not good for Oliveira because, again, he stands right in front of his opponent, chin up high and exposed. He's very easy to hit. So what's interesting about this fight is Gaethje slowing down and fading a lot as fights wear on is definitely an issue. But by the time that happens, he's very likely to have inflicted so much damage on Oliveira that Oliveira is going to be too beat up and hurt to make him pay for it. And this is kind of what we saw in Gaethje's last fight against Chandler, right? Where Gaethje definitely faded into that second and third round. But because he had inflicted so much damage on Chandler, Chandler was too tired and hurt and beat up himself to really make Gaethje pay for it. And I could see the same thing happening in this Oliveira fight. So the way I look at this matchup is, at absolute worst, it's a 50-50 fight. I think the odds should have been close to the even money range. I don't understand why Oliveira is a big favourite in this matchup. It's the reason why I'm betting Gaethje. But again, I don't feel confident in Gaethje. It's a 50-50 fight that could go either way, which means I have to bet Gaethje. I'm letting the odds do the work for me and taking the underdog. And like I say, if the odds were the other way round, if Oliveira was 2.50 plus 150, I would have bet him instead. I have no dog in this fight, really. I think it could go either way. I'm letting the odds do the work for me and betting Gaethje, though, this weekend. Because the way that I look at it is, the two, aside from Oliveira landing a big shot and knocking Gaethje out, which can happen, the two advantages that Oliveira has in this fight are on the ground and later in the fight when Gaethje starts to fade. The reason why I like Gaethje in this fight is because I don't think Oliveira is going to be able to take Gaethje down early. So his advantages on the ground aren't a huge deal until later in the fight. And if the fight does go into the third, fourth or fifth round where Gaethje will start to slow down, I think he will have inflicted so much damage on Oliveira that it's very likely that Oliveira will be too tired and beat up to make Gaethje pay for slowing down in rounds 3, 4 and 5. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I like Gaethje in this fight because even though Oliveira has big advantages in certain areas over Gaethje, and Oliveira definitely has passed the victory, Oliveira needs to put himself in a lot of danger in order to execute those advantages, and I'd be really surprised if he can execute those advantages without taking major damage and getting knocked out. So that's why I lean towards Gaethje in this fight. But it's a complex fight. Oliveira is very dangerous on the feet. He could for sure catch Gaethje with something on the feet and knock him out. Gaethje could slip, get knocked down in round 1, find himself in a bad position on the ground, get choked out. Lots of ways this fight can go. I wouldn't feel confident on either side. But based on the odds, you got to let the odds do the work for you. And I do think Gaethje gives you a good risk to reward ratio at underdog odds. But let me know what you think in the comments below. It's a very complex, interesting fight. So I hope you enjoyed that breakdown. I hope you enjoyed all these breakdowns. And don't forget, if you want to watch breakdown videos for all the prelim fights on this card, head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com. Link to that in the description below. Also, don't forget to like this video. If you want me to continue doing videos like this, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out MMA Betting Tips. It's a VIP chat room. You can talk to myself and other members in the community about upcoming fights, anything betting related. On top of that, you'll also find a wide range of bets on the website, over unders, prop bets, straight money line bets. All of them are profitable. I think you'll like it a lot. So thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe. Take care, guys, and I'll see you very soon for another breakdown video. Nice one, guys. Bye.